Sure. So welcome everybody. We're just past 1 o'clock and we're going to try and stick to time today. Steve Cameron's my name. I'm a co-convener at DisasterWISE here. Many of you I've met before through DisasterWISE or previous roles, so welcome, and it's good to see you all again. And it's great to see some new faces here as well. So welcome to everybody here today for our session. We go between 1 and 2 p.m. and we'll go through just some basic housekeeping in a minute. But first of all, I would like to do an acknowledgement of country. And I do acknowledge all the traditional owners of the lands and waterways in which we're all coming from today. I'm on Wadawurrung country. I'm down in Anglesea, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also extend my respects to all First Nations people joining us here today. We have a bit of a tradition here at DisasterWISE. If you'd like to also put where you are coming from and what country you're on in the chat, that would be great. So you can introduce yourself and the country that you are on. That'd be great. A brief introduction about DisasterWISE. Some of you have heard this before, and some of you have been involved in the co-design process and to where DisasterWISE is now. So you'll know it very well, but DisasterWISE has been part of a 5-year project that's been supported by Fight to Flourish as a 5-year program with Monash University and funding through Monash and also the Paul Ramsay Foundation. Bringing DisasterWISE together as a national learning network has been co-designed by people with lived and learned experience of disasters. And the whole idea is to really amplify community voice in this space, to cultivate connections and trust between ourselves and others, to broker diverse ways of knowing and advocate really for community-led approaches. We've got a broad vision, which is going to take some time, but we're all part of a movement now, but it is about building resilience through self-determination and community-led action. And I guess the biggest announcements for DisasterWISE at the moment is that we are becoming independent. It is part of our role to spin out DisasterWISE from Monash before the end of the year. And we've now got a new board in place. I think we did have some of the board registered to come. If they are here, welcome. And with the new board in place, we're actually moving to the next phase of DisasterWISE becoming an independent entity and a spin out from Monash and Fight to Flourish by the end of 25. This month's theme builds on last month's conversation. We talked about community-led versus community-centered approaches last month, and it was a great conversation. We could have talked about it all day with everybody who was here, and some of you were here, so thank you for that. We summarised all the information that was discussed, and we put together a range of topics, if you like, with the working group to see how we should continue the conversation and build on that. And today, we're really looking at relationships, and everything that came to fruition out of that discussion was important, but it really came forward about a matter of trust and building connections and building bridges between ourselves as community members, and also between communities, and also between communities and organisations. So there's a summary that's been developed. Mon put a huge amount of effort in from the recording that we had and has summarised the information. And what we thought we'd do today is build on that conversation and invite some people to speak from their perspectives. So Monica will facilitate the rest of the conversation soon. And we have some guests. We have Karina, Steve, Andrew, and John. And I'm not going to say any more about those because Mon's going to help introduce those people and where they're from in their community and their roles. But what we'll do is have a discussion with those folks till about 1:35, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms so we all get a chance to speak. The idea is obviously we're all contributing to the conversation as part of this session. We'll come back at about 1:45. I'll be timekeeping to make sure we stay on track, and report back from each of the groups and close at 2 o'clock. We also leave the line open for an extra half an hour till 2:30 for any further discussion and questions, if anybody would like to stay. And it has a multiple of roles there. We also understand that people have lived and learned experience of disasters, and if there's anything triggering or you need to talk about or even give us any feedback, you're welcome to stay after the session between 2 and 2:30 as well to continue the conversation, but also make sure you're in touch with us about anything in particular that you might need some support with. So just some basic housekeeping before we hand over to Mon. It's really an informal community-led conversation with opportunities for our principals to connect, learn and be part of change in your own context or maybe in a broader context, depending on who you are, your community and what your challenges and opportunities are. many of us have experienced trauma that living with climate change induced and other disasters bring. So we do exercise self-care, and we hope that everybody can practice personal self-care. If you need to turn off your screen, that's fine, especially if something is triggering. And as I said before, if you do need some time and space, take so. And the session, as I said, will be between 2 and 2:30 if you need to chat. We will ask everybody just to be curious and respectful. We all arrive with an open heart and mind. We encourage active listening and being mindful of the shared space. If you need to continue the conversation and can't quite get a word in, obviously use the chat, and there'll be a summary from today's session as well. We've got a large group. I'm not sure how many are here, Mon, but quite a few. So we will divide into those rooms. We'll handle that a little bit later on. And there's no platform for giving advice. We understand everybody's got their own experience here, and we just make sure that's not a place to spruik or endorse programs, projects, or businesses. We have organised a whiteboard for today and have some questions that will come up for you during the session, where you can all contribute to the whiteboard, and one of them I've tested it so that it works. And of course, this session's being recorded, and hopefully you're okay with that. And if you have any particular issues with that, you can even private message me on the chat if you like. But I'm going to hand over to Monica to take us through the rest of the facilitated session. Over to you, Mon.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. So I'm Monica. I am the knowledge broker for DisasterWISE and have been for just over a year now. And I come with lived experience of the 2017 ex-cyclone Debbie floods that hit southeast Queensland. So yeah, really glad to be here, and I'm really glad to see lots of familiar and new faces. So we've got a couple of people who are sharing some of their experiences and their work that they do within their own communities. And I just want to kind of just jump straight in and start working through that. But before I get started, I'll quickly just introduce them. I'm just going to put a little spotlight on some of our speakers. Give me 2 seconds. There we go. Got Andrew. We've got Karina and Steve. Here we go. So I'll just go through each of these guys, these wonderful people who've joined us. So Karina Severs is from the Eden Community Access Centre. And Eden Community Access Centre is an independent organisation connecting people with vital services since 2000. It's now Eden's go-to hub for community connection and support. We've also got Steve Coleman here from South Coast Sustainability Alliance, otherwise known as SHASA. SHASA is an alliance of Eurobodella community members formed in 2014. SHASA's key focus is to highlight and support action to mitigate climate change for the region. And we have Andrew Monteiro from the Maribyrnong Community Recovery Committee. So the CRC was established in April 2023 to provide advice to council on recovery issues, barriers and needs after the Maribyrnong River flood in October 2022. So thanks all for being here. Now, Karina, I'm going to start with you with this question. So what does trust look like in your community-led spaces? I know we've had a couple of conversations about this before, and you've got a lot, I think, on this topic. So
yeah, it's a big topic and it's an important topic, Monica. So hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting us to speak. I think trust in our community and for our organisation is just an absolute necessity. Otherwise, I don't think we would have been around for the 25 years that we have. And we promote ourselves, obviously, as being a caring organisation, and we offer personal service, helping people navigate all sorts of challenges in their lives, including the bushfires of 2020, but all sorts of things, relationship breakdowns, getting older, being sick, going overseas, booking medical appointments, claiming Centrelink payments, all those types of things. And in our interactions, we find out so much personal information about people And we live in a very small community. So our Eden's about 3,500 people. And I suppose if you include our outlying villages, probably gets up to something about 4,500 people. So we know lots of people, and people know, you know, we all know each other. So information that, and we need to know a lot of information about people to be able to help them with whatever challenge they're having in their relationships or in their lives. So we need that trusting relationship. So trust isn't just desirable, but it's a necessary infrastructure to how our access centre does business.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense with your organisation being around for 25 years. I mean, we visited you a couple of months ago, and that centre just seemed like such a hub from our perspective when we entered Eden. It was one of the first buildings that we saw driving into Eden, beautiful Eden. And it's served as such a hub, and can really see that based on a lot of the things that you've shared with us as well about some of the programs that you've done to build a lot of those connections of trust. It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's and to maintain that and promote ourselves as such, we need to be walking the walk, talking the talk.
Yeah.
Putting our money where our mouth is, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've got to not only care, but be very confidential in how, and careful about how we manage those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if you're also within a smaller community as well, where you're crossing paths with a lot of these people in lots of different settings, that's really important. And I think that might be pretty similar to you, Steve, with Shasa. You guys are pretty small, but also broader because of the Eurobodella region's quite large. So how do you find extending that trust through your community-led spaces?
Yeah, thanks, Monica. Well, look, I think there's two aspects. There's the internal trust inside our organisation, which is a crucial aspect of how we operate and continue to be successful. So in 2019 and 20, we were severely impacted by the fires, and we're a long, thin shire, not that big in population, but the impacts were profound. And you know, so we've been going 10 years, and one of the things about our shire is that initially we had very good relationships with council, and we were very supportive and felt supported as well. But then of, you know, political changes and change of personnel and management, it became a more adversarial process as we tried to advocate for stronger action on climate change, especially post fires, where we saw great deficiencies, and we're trying to critique some of the work that was going on. So that trust became severely tested. And I mean, the social capital that was built with the community was strong, but with the council, it was difficult. But I think we've actually repaired that now. We've had different personnel have come in, and we feel like we've sort of come out of that difficult space, and we're now in a much more productive zone with council. And a lot of the initiatives that we're proposing, we're looking at collaboration with council. We also collaborate a lot with other community groups. We're very good at accessing and raising funds and getting grants and looking for projects that we can implement. And so community groups get a great advantage from our capacity to assist them in that process. And the thing about trust is high trust is high speed. If you've got good trust, then information and communication runs far more efficiently, and the politics of it gets taken out as people work with people.
Yeah, it becomes a bit more of like a naturally sustainable sort of ecosystem of support if that trust is sort of sustained more long term. And I guess that also can help in the support of what future outcomes there are with future climate-induced disasters or major community disruptors. That sounds really interesting. You mentioned with the council, and you know, having some of those issues around trust and then sort of building that back up again, and that goes both ways, and managing that. I know that Andrew, you've come from the Maribyrnong CRC, and that's sort of come through the council there. How are you guys finding it with trust, and it not only just with council but also within your broader community? Because I also know that you're also in an inner city area with lots of diverse cultures. Yeah, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, we started off in April 2023, right? The first year was a pretty bad year for us in terms of trust, right? So we built programs without even talking to the community in terms of what required. So I actually joined the CRC in somewhere around last year. So one of the things that we did in our first meeting was to understand, listen, we built all these programs, but did we speak to the community first to ask them what the program? So trust basically is a two-way communication. You cannot have one way and say, this is what we need to do for you, and this is the best thing for you. No, it's best to go through the community and ask, okay, what are the things we have? Now, to give an example, when we did the insurance guide, we realized the community is actually split. After a flood, right? You will realize there are some people who have insurance, some people who don't have insurance, right? So if I say I'm going to have this insurance guide and we're going to give it to everyone, there's no point, because there are a lot of people, it'll be horrible for them, right? And there are some people who probably don't have enough insurance, right? So it's trying to understand the community needs, trying to understand what the problems are, and that's how we did. So what we did was, and I think we had some good support here, we got them split into two areas. We said one is bricks and mortars, or we got to identify how to fix these things. And the second thing, and the most important thing, is the mental health, right? What are the things that because mental health, when we're addressing that, we can bring the community together, right? With the insurance guide, it's probably the people who have insurance will probably need to get that one. But that's also very important, right? Because then they can share good stories and things like that. So when we started looking at the mental health, which we found was the core thing that we need to address, is to try to bring the community back together. Now, during the floods, and I can give you my personal example, my daughter was in, I think, year 10, and she finished year 12 by the time she came back into our house, right? So 2 years she was away from the house. But she had 3 or 4 people, friends from the same group, but we split, right? So we were not able to. So we need to understand even the kids, what they go through, how we can manage that, right? These are very important things when we talk about trust. And I saw someone asking how do we define trust? Trust basically has to be two-way communication. It cannot be saying, I'm going to set up these programs for the community and we're going to do all these things, we'll have these, all these bells and whistles and we do everything. If it doesn't make any sense to them, it's probably not worth it, right?
Yeah.
So that is, and I think one thing what I noticed was, and I was talking to George also, perception does matter. So when you got a plan to do it, you rather go to the community and ask them, listen, what else do you want? Can we build this program? And it's best to get it that way, because then you get the buy-in from them, and word will then pass on to everyone and says, listen, we're going to have this music program, and let's all join together. Let's not talk about the floods. And the last thing people want to do is talk about the floods, right? They just want to see what solutions are we going to have? What's the plan for the future, right? And there are some things that within your reach, some things that are not within your reach. We need to be honest with them and say, listen, this is not within our scope. To give an example, when you talk about mitigation, right? It's nothing to do with the actual council, right? Mitigation has to be done at a state level, right? Melbourne Water has to look at that. We can only advocate for that, but we can't guide them. But we need to be very honest with the community to say, listen, these are the things we are working on. These are things that we can't work on. But if you think about the disaster, what are the 4 areas? We need to then address that. I think that's where we be able to basically, bring people back together.
Yeah, and I think also when I was thinking about this topic and ways that me and my community engage with each other that aren't necessarily focused on I don't know, I think like people who have that lived experience, there is a lot of fatigue as well, and having that fatigue over talking about disasters or talking about like the impending sort of doom of the next thing to come that might come, having those moments of even just building those relationships and building those connections through trust in doing things that might be through like connecting with food or connecting with a local like community barbecue, doing sorts of things like that. Do you guys do, and I'm asking you all now, like, is that something that you guys engage with or are conscious of in your work, community-led work?
Do you want me to answer? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go for it.
yes, we do. In fact, actually, I'm glad that you asked the question. We made a list here. We had some music in the park, right? Bringing everyone together, just different types of music. Then we got a river box with just just people walking together and talking and things like that, right? Then now we're thinking about having a dog park, right? I mean that's still a work in progress. And there's a few things that and like home maintenance. We plan some home maintenance, or especially in terms of the gardens. Can we get people to come together and help one another? Because after the floods, there was a lot of damage to the gardens, right?
Yeah.
And the best thing for you to forget your problems is when you go and sit in the garden, right?
Yes,
When you look at
definitely. Can be very helpful when you've got a community
right.
garden,
So
for
that
sure.
was one of the key things we did at the start, to say, listen, we can't fix your house, but we definitely try to see whether we can help to fix your garden, right? So I think these are things, but it's more than what we're doing is probably it's more about listening. And then I think there was one question saying, can Andrew ask how do we go about getting the needs? What we did was we actually went around to the community and spoke to people in terms of what are the key things that we need to look at, right? And very often people said, like, we lost communication with all our friends because a lot of people have moved out of the place for about more than a year or so, right? And bringing them back together, like, we do not understand what their status is, how they are managing their mental health, right? But the only way we could do it is have programs, right? And then when people want to open up, they will open up, but we can't go and ask them, what are you doing? Nothing worse than asking a patient, how are you feeling,
Yeah, it's a great point of connection. And I think that it's something to be conscious of based on what the kind of context of your community is like and who's actually part of the community. And it makes me want to kind of jump into the second question. And Karina, I think you might maybe have some responses to this one, but how did you sustain trusted connections and relationships across the lived experiences and the power dynamics, whether that was through council or that was through some of the community work or the direct community work post the 2020 fire?
Excuse me. So it makes me reflect on some of the, following the fires, some of the services that came to town, offering service and saying, oh, you can trust us, we can do this for you, we can do that. But within a very short period of time, they were gone again. And so in a lot of respects, that trust was broken for people, for individuals. So they're looking for people that are going to be there for the longer term, and also people that they don't have to continually repeat their story, their background, their need, all these types of things. They just want to tell one person and then, not have to relive it over and over or be judged over and over, supposedly, because they're putting themselves out there on a regular basis, and they didn't want to do that. They wanted to have one organisation that they dealt with, and an organisation that could deal with, a whole myriad of issues that they could support them with to get through. So, so that really does come to mind, that being in it for the long run.
That's it. Yeah.
It's really important, and promoting that and saying, like for us, we've been around for 25 years and we hope to be here for another 25. So that's really, really important, is proving to your community that you're here for the long haul and you're invested in that community. We live here, we shop here, all those things help to say to people, it's somebody that we can trust. They've been, through the traps. They provide these programs on a regular basis. So all those types of things build that trust for people.
And I think it's also just like familiar faces as well, you know.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I think, you know, we've had these conversations a couple of times about that short-termism when it comes to those programs, or the cycle of different programs that come in and to support with good intentions, but the funding isn't there for them to stay long term and to maintain those relationships for much longer, which means obviously community are constantly going through the cycle of different faces, different like the same conversations but different faces. And you mentioned that being it can be quite exhausting and also a bit traumatic, having to bring up those things all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to start again every time their needs change, you know, and following a disaster, like there's the immediate need, and then the longer term need, and then, you know, that future need. So when people understand where you're coming from, it just it shortens that whole process, as well as that trauma. They don't have to revisit the trauma or be judged.
Yeah, and that's a huge one as well. I think that, you know, people with that lived experience of disasters, that the feeling of having to go through or relive that trauma, and also having to consider how people might take in your story and perceive your story, is also a massive part of that process of building.
And then make a judgment as to whether you deserve this amount of help or you don't, you know. People don't need that. They're going through enough. They don't need to continually put layer on layer on them. We just need to accept them for who they are and what they've been through.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, did you have any thoughts about that second question? How do you sustain trusted connections and relationships across different lived experiences and those power dynamics as well?
Yeah, thanks, Monica. I think in many ways we're a voice for the community, and we're not a political voice, but we're a practical voice trying to look at solutions to practical problems. And sometimes if we see a gap, we'll step in and try and do something that's appropriate. For example, after the 1920 fires, there was such a deep upset and grief in the community. We felt that no one was really processing it in any worthwhile way. So we convened basically a conversation, and probably about 50 people turned up just to share their lived experience of what it was like to be in the fires. And we were trying to do that without judgment, or we weren't about giving advice. It was really just a chance to debrief and reflect and to share the raw emotion of that experience.
Yeah.
So, you know, and they're sort of powerful little touchstones that we occasionally touch where we feel there's a gap. Another thing where we saw there was a gap was in the leadership space. So we both partnered with the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation and another company to run a 18-month leadership program for a group of 20 participants, which sort of delved deeply into how to build resilience and capability inside the Shire amongst a group of community leaders.
Yeah, that's interesting. And even then, I think you mentioned it before, like building also that trust within your own like community, and having all of those different people that become involved in the sort of like greater purpose of building those connections. Yeah, that trust then also is so valuable within that sort of environment as well.
Sorry, but I think one thing that's helped us build a trusted community group is a clear focus both on values and our vision of what we need to do, which is relatively narrow. So we're not trying to get into the political space. We certainly individually play in the political space, but as a group and as a not-for-profit, you know, our tax deductibility status relies on not being too political. So we have to, and so good governance and good processes just help us sort of maintain a pretty highly efficient, viable organisation.
Yeah. That's usually how community-led action works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got a couple of minutes left in the conversation, and we'll hear from Andrew last. So I'll jump over to you, Andrew, to finish it
Yeah,
off.
one of the things that I want to talk about today is like how we build the insurance guide, right? In terms of trust, to build the trust. I remember when we had the first meeting about coming up with this insurance guide, there was a lot of people around the world said, "Oh, we got Daniel Millino, we're going to get him to come and talk about it, and we're going to get him to talk to we'll get all the agents." I was one of the few who said, "No, this is not about Daniel Millino telling us what to do, right? This is about what the community does." And I said, we don't want agents to tell us what the insurance guide needs to be done. We want the stories of the community to be in the guide, real stories of what we went through, and that can be the guide for future, right? Or anyone who is still going through the insurance process to follow the certain thing. And that's one of the reasons how we actually built the trust. So people said, you know what? We went around talking to, I think we got a survey of about 22 odd people. So I think this is the insurance guide we've got here. We got it in, sorry, I'm trying to promote it. Okay. I'm happy to sell it for $1 each, please. So So what we did was we spoke to the community. We got a sample of all the we did a survey around the community, spoke to them, understood what the different problems they had, right? And then based on that, we built the insurance guide. The insurance guide didn't look only at the insurance things, but also the mental health during the process, what impact it has caused. Because I mean, if you speak to the agents will come back and tell you, oh, you need to follow this. They'll come up with a proper disclosure description, right? We said no, we don't want that. We want real examples of what happened during the floods. How did the community go through this process? What are the good stories? What are the bad stories? Build a guide based on that. That's the only way you can build trust. I found build trust with the people.
Yeah.
And then we had Daniel then to promote it and say, yeah, this is a fantastic guide. And I think now we want to promote it in other areas too. Is that right, Georgia? Yeah. So
Yeah. That sounds great. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities for lots of different outputs from a lot of the community-driven work, which always happens to sort of be the case with a lot of community-led action.
that is the best way, Monica. If you can get the community involved in any programs you want to create, right? That's the best way to approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Okay, so it's 1:34, so I'll just quickly give a brief intro into us moving to the next part of the session. Thank you three for sharing your insights into those questions as well. We're going to jump into breakout rooms, and we're using a whiteboard, which I'll drop the link in the chat. And we're basically going to, I guess, discuss those two questions in about 10 minutes or so. Feel free to just jump in and write some of your dot points. Sorry, let me just grab the whiteboard. Here we are. Yeah, feel free to share your perspectives. We know that there's a mixture of people here. There's community folk who are from community-led organisations and groups. And we've also got some council and some agency people here as well. We've sort of divvied up the sort of post-it notes in the whiteboard to show a more professional perspective from the agency or council perspective, and from the community side perspective, because at the end of the day, this conversation is about trust, and we want to really I guess, set the sort of conversations around acknowledging what are perspectives and then also what are our own individual experiences and our lived experiences of trust within a community. So jump in, and we're going to jump into breakout rooms. I think, Steve, you've got that sorted? Yeah. And we will be back in 10 minutes. We'll see you guys soon.
So we might go around each room and just get people to quickly report back on what their discussion was about. I saw the sticky notes going up. mainly on the first question, I think. But maybe if we quickly zip around to each room. We had 4 rooms. We'll make sure everybody gets a chance to report back. So if you could be relatively brief, but obviously represent what was discussed from both the community lived experience perspective and also what trust might mean from an observation or agency or government perspective as well. So maybe we'll go to room 1, which I have here. Pete, I think it was your room with Vicky, Simone, Paul, Carl, Judith, Jacqueline, Amber, and Michelle. Who'd like to speak?
We had a lot of discussion about sticky notes and Zoom boards. So I think we got lost. It didn't really work. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, but yeah, we didn't really sort of understand how it was all working. So, but because
maybe about the conversation as opposed to the sticky note.
Yeah, we didn't have a conversation because it was all about where's the Zoom board. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
And full transparency, Steve, I didn't have this one in my diary, so I joined late. The team were challenged by the sticky notes. But I think just for me personally, I think, I was just keen to clarify, when it referenced to space with, was it, a physical space as in like a social asset, or a space as in, forum, and the team confirmed that it was, just a potentially even just a meeting or a forum. But I did highlight the importance of making sure that the space itself is appropriate, making sure that it's relevant and a space that the community is comfortable in engaging with. And that's twofold. That's an observation from a professional perspective that I've had, but also from that community perspective. We've obviously, in this online world, there's a lot of reliance on online forums, but we actually miss a big cohort of the community if everything is in an online space. And then that cultural sensitivity, around government institutions and the implications that provides to certain cohorts of the community, ensuring that it is a neutral space. And again, twofold, to ensure that we as an agency are showing leadership and we're aware of having a neutral space, but then for the community to be able to open up and engage with us, we also need to make sure it's appropriate and that they feel safe in that space.
That's great, Amber. Thank you so much for raising that. And I think it's left in some ways a little bit vague for a reason, to be interpreted according to whoever we are and how we operate within our own communities or organisations for that point as well. So, to be a community member, and we are all members somewhere, but to be able to invite our own members of our own communities to a place that we're all comfortable can be so different according to who we are and how we operate, and that can be just something the community chooses. And it may not even be the same place that the community invites agencies and government and others to participate.
So from a community perspective, I work on the basis that there is no they, we are the they.
Yeah.
That we need to gather our voice, focus on our outcomes. Hopefully agencies and others who come in will listen. Generally they won't. So it's a duocracy. Knock yourselves out, do what you want. We're going to go and focus on the outcomes. If you want to come on board, great. If you don't, we'll get it done. So I think one of the great tragedies that I see in disaster communities is they think that it's a well-oiled machine in a catastrophic disaster and everybody knows what they're doing. It's like, no, they don't. They're all scrambling, running around doing their thing. So communities get together, gather your voice, create opportunities for everybody to be heard, for everybody to enact, be focused on the outcomes. And yeah, it's but don't, you must take ownership of your own recovery, because you're going to be there for 20 years. The ones who come in won't be. I'm a little, well, you know what I'm like, Steve. So
thanks, Pete. Thanks, Amber. We might throw to one of the other groups to see what they discussed and how they went about it. So over with what's on my screen for room 2. So Deb Richardson's Felicity, Iris, John Morn, Christy, Natasha, and Andrew. Any comments or thoughts or sticky notes?
Yeah. So yeah, one of the things we actually continued with the topic of finding trust, right? And there's a lot of good examples that we got across around the room about how we have to go around trying to find trust. And the key thing was basically is listening to the people, right? And one thing I think that is very, very important is like, and then we mentioned towards the end is it's okay good to come up with strategies, but if you don't know how to execute it, it's not worth it, right? So you got to have the right people to help to execute those strategies. So that's why it is very important when you speak to the community, understand what is required. Based on that, you build your strategies or build your programs, and then you can execute those programs. So that's the key thing that I took. I don't know, Felicity, you want to add to it?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, we heard from Karina and Deb at Eden Access and really valuable insights about reliability and just like being there and how important that is just to provide space for people to share if they want to, or simply have a cuppa or whatever it may be, in terms of support. But yeah, I guess what you require to be there ongoing and be that reliable, trustworthy group, person, whatever it may be, organization, is that sustainability. So I guess what the folks talked about in that initial panel discussion. We also did talk about transparency and I guess delivering, I guess this is more so on the professional observation side of things, delivering on what you say you're going to. And that goes back to what Andrew was saying about being sure that you can execute something that you're committing to. And I guess that's probably it, unless anyone else wanted to add some further notes.
I'll quickly jump in. So I've been sort of listening and supporting Andrew on the side, but my name's Georgia and I'm working in flood recovery at Maribyrnong City Council. And I think just jumping in to say one of my biggest observations is that, Pete, I'm sort of echoing what you said earlier. The local context is so important, and often agencies or, local governments don't know that unless you tell them. And so it's our job as agencies or as local government coming in to really respect and acknowledge and learn from the local context, because you're experts in your sort of lived experience and your community, and we need to understand that we're not. And one of my big learnings was just for any sort of agencies or any local government staff in the room, continue to show up even when it's hard, because the relationships will be built over time and that work is possible, but you've got to demonstrate commitment to it even when it's hard.
That's great. Thank you for following up. I knew you were sitting on the side the whole time and helping out, but it's really great to have a range of perspectives on what's required from both those community voice and also showing up, as you say, from an agency and organisation perspective, even when it is difficult, because it's often very difficult. Another room, got 2 to go. We'll be quick. With Catherine, Deb Borsos, Jess, Mihir, and Phoebe and Veronica. Any further thoughts from your room?
Yeah, I can quickly jump in. Yes, we talked, we didn't use the sticky notes because we were too busy talking. So, but we did talk about recognising who you're turning up to. So there's we talked a little bit about, there is a paper by a guy called Tibble in New Zealand who talks about engaging with Māori, and there's some 5 principles that he uses that really apply to everybody. And if I very quickly go through them, they kind of summarize what we talked about. Why are you engaging? Like, what is the purpose of turning up, and what are you going there for? Who's going, and are they the right people to be going into that situation, or is there somebody else from your organisation that should be doing it? Who's leading the conversation? Are you going to lead it, or are you going to let them lead it and you participate? So there's a sort of a thought around that. And why should they turn up? Like, what are you actually bringing to the table? What are you bringing and what are you offering to the conversation, rather than just what are you there to take away? And then what information they provide, what are you going to do with that information? So, and how are you going to kind of engage them in letting them know with what happens with that information, how it comes back to benefit them? And these are all things that kind of build into that trust, to building that trust. And I think the 2 other things that that came from our youth people were recognize how people identify and respect that. Like, you need to go in and see them as them, not who you want them to be, and really respect that. And there was one other, time. You know, relationships take time. So the sooner you can start building those relationships before events happen, the better you're going to be able to respond and recover after events. And it's not going to happen overnight. Sometimes take years, especially if relationships have been tried before and burnt. And I'm thinking particularly about our Indigenous communities where relationships have been really damaged, and you're going to have to regrow that trust, and it takes time. So be prepared to do the hard yards.
Yeah, all very important points. And these things are things that communities can lead, and communities will do things that the organisations may not even be involved in, and that's okay. So it's about the community working together, and then the agencies and organisations moving in and out of those spaces as needed. Yeah, thank you. Finally, one last room. I think we've got Andrew, Kelly, Laurel, Steph, Steve, Coleman, who spoke earlier, and Suniti. Who'd like to speak?
Oh, I'll speak.
Go ahead, Steve.
Avoid the embarrassing silence.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, we didn't use the whiteboard. We had a sort of general conversation about trust, and in particular, Sunit and Steph talked about some of the processes of setting up their organisation, which I think is in Anglesey. Was that right? Or
Whittlesea.
Whittlesea. Okay. Yeah, and Sunit was very passionate about how she'd made connections in community, and sounded like a great organisation. I'd love to join it. I'm a bit far away though. Anything else from anybody?
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you.
Is that it for everybody from that group? Sure. Thank you. Well, Mon, we might just hand over to wrap up. I'll hand back to you, and we'll finish up for the formal part of the session, I guess, and we'll leave the line open, as we said before, for an extra half an hour. So over to you, Mon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for coming, sharing your thoughts. I'm not sure if any of you are following us on social media, but we've also recently just announced expressions of interest for our upcoming event in September. So if you're interested and you're part of a community group and want to contribute to that event, the expressions of interest form I'll put in the chat. I'll also put a link to the Community Congress, which is the name of the event for September. We've got a page dedicated for it on our website. This isn't the official announcement. The official announcement for it all will be at the end of this month, but our aim is to really get a lot of different community perspectives, community groups, community leaders to come and engage and be able to have a bit of a lightning talk and share what they're up to. Yeah, that's kind of it from me. I feel like that's probably the biggest news update to share with you all. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming. We'll have the recording at the end of the month that you can access on our website and on YouTube, as Steve said. We'll also have a summary of this conversation that will also be available at the end of the month as well. What social media platforms are we on? We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we're on LinkedIn. The three major ones, unfortunately. Yes, that's it. All right, thanks, guys. We'll stay on for a bit and continue to have a chat. Whoever wants to continue to talk. Lovely to see you all.